if he can find that in his inbox, that's exactly the right link. 24th of April.
Okay. Just trying again.
Chris, John Baggett, is that a picture behind you of a Flying 15, or is that one of these Zoom backdrops? No, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, now you can hear me.
Yeah.
No, it's a J24, as in a keel boat, American keel boat.
Oh, so it's a picture.
It's a picture, yeah. It's my own picture of my own boat.
Mm-hmm.
Right, shall we
Okay,
start?
Fiona, what are you doing?
Okay. Can everyone see the screen?
Yep.
What I'll do is ask you, if you can, to go on to mute. But feel free if you want to ask questions. We'll say this at the end, but I've already said this to Richard. So any difficult questions can go to Helen. Any easy questions can definitely come to myself. So firstly, let's introduce ourselves. So Helen, I'll let you start.
All right. I'm Helen Seldon. Most of you know me. I came to sailing via a circuitous route. I sailed a bit in a topper as a kid, but then went off to the dark side and started rowing for far too long, and then started picking up sailing again about 10 years ago with John. I think the best result I've had sailing wise is winning Cows Week, but prior to that, rowing wise, I'd won Henley a couple of times and won a gold medal at the Home Countries Regatta. My biggest embarrassment, apart from sailing with John all the time, clearly, is falling out of the boat the first time I went out with him in the Flying 15 twice, because, yeah, that's how you do it. Anyway, that's me.
So I think most of you know me, but just give you a little bit more. I did put on there that I was in the management suite, but it looks like Helen's doctored this presentation and instead I'm in the pipes and slippers area. But I started sailing in mirrors, scorpions, and then into the youth squad. I got chucked out of the youth squad because I was going to be this size. So basically went into sailing 2-tonners, did an Admiral's Cup qualifiers and the IOR circuit, and then into IMS 50 and the 50 circuit, Swan 60s, 80s. You can see I'm getting bigger boats. And then while I joined Datchet, I was still sailing 107-foot cruiser racer. I also did trimarans sailing as well, not successfully. I'll talk about that as we go forward. Best results in the SB3, I was European Cup winner, third in the Nationals. Etchells Worlds came 17th. Which doesn't sound brilliant, but when you've got sailing with people against like John Bertram, Chris Law, and Dennis Connor all in the same regatta, it was a big accomplishment just to be able to get into the actual top 25% of the fleet, and a really good event. And then also I've been first monohull on the Round the Island race 5 times, so first time round, and then also won Cows Week with Helen, and we won that with a day to spare. I won the national championships for the Silver Fleet in 2000 for Flying 15s. Biggest embarrassment, we took a 34-foot trimaran, 32-foot trimaran, raced it across the channel on the way back, flipped it upside down, and then played I Spy while we're waiting for the helicopter to come pick us up 9 miles offshore. So 230,000 pounds worth of boat that disappeared off pretty quickly. So thankfully don't do that anymore because that was just too embarrassing. So what are we going to do? Talk about tonight, and just clicking back on. So the idea is quickly to talk about our journey to the Worlds. We've done a few World Championships. We were planning and talk about going to Fremantle in next year, and then also so really going through the plan and the timeline, the way we work, the boats that we've taken and what we've done to actually get ourselves race fit and mentally fit. sailing practice and also making it a bit of fun. And at the end of it, I used to be, many years ago when I was doing all the stupid stuff in the boats, I was the Harken agent for the UK and Ireland, and also for Spinlock. And so I just want to talk a little bit about Harken, but for dinghies, and why thinking about a different Harken blocks and the way they work help improve some of your sailing and so forth. Only a few slides on that. We will finish hopefully way before the clap, but obviously if anybody wants to ask questions, please go ahead and do so. And I'm expecting you to continuously drink all the way through, so Roger, please do, so we can see your notes at the end of it as well. Hey Gabrielle.
John, are you recording this?
Yes.
Okay.
On
I'm
the
gone.
cloud. Okay. So I hand over to Helen here for the start.
Thanks, John. Just to let you know, Alistair's still trying to get in. He's getting the he's not being let into the room bit, but anyway, there we go. Yeah, so I'm going to talk through sort of the plan and the timeline. Being a project manager by trade, I think that's why this one was handed off to me. So we're quite lucky in the, oh, can you flick the slide down, please, John? Thank you very much. So as you hopefully know, with the Flying 15, the World Championships are held every 2 years. And generally speaking, we know about the next World Championships 3 to 4 years in advance. And that's really when we start discussing whether we're going to go to it or not. And there is a difference between whether it's a flyaway event, so Southern Hemisphere, or whether it is going to be a trailing event, which is generally Northern Hemisphere in Europe. So we usually spend sort of the first few just deciding whether to go or not, because then we want to spend some time actually researching what the venue is going to be like, what the sailing is going to be like, to work out what we need to do with the boat. Also looking at what the accommodation is around there, and where we want to be and what the best place for us is. So we sort of know how we perform better, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, but really researching where we want to go. And saving, which for a flyaway event, as you can imagine, is quite expensive. So it's not something you can kind of just drop in at the last minute, or I certainly can't anyway. So once we've sort of got those parameters and we've actually decided to go, it usually happens 3 years in advance, if not slightly ahead. I think for New Zealand, I think we decided 4 years ahead when I presented John with the information that was presented at the Hong Kong Worlds and said, I think we're going to this one. So that was 4 years in advance. Might even be slightly longer actually because of the timelines. And so we spend the sort of next year, sort of 3 years to 2 years ahead of time, prepping the boat, doing the practicing, doing our research. And we basically will book the accommodation as soon as it becomes available. Actually for New Zealand, I messaged the people 18 months in advance before they'd opened it to make sure we got on the books, because we found out there was a place that was literally stumbling distance from the sailing club, and that was the place to be. You overlooked the boat park, and so we got that in as quickly as possible. Obviously you have to work out what your timelines are in advance to be able to do that. Then that helps you with booking the flights, because then as soon as they become available you can book them as well, and obviously they're cheaper that far out than they will be if you're trying to book them 2 weeks in advance, which some people were trying to do when they were going to the New Zealand Worlds, we found out, which seemed a little bit odd to me. So for the flyaway series, generally the qualification series is going to be the year ahead, which is different for the European ones. And so we'll be preparing as soon as the dates and everything and venues are announced. We'll be preparing which ones we want to go to. So you have to go to 3 out of the 5 in the UK to be able to qualify, and then they'll rank you in order according to your results. Usually we'll know that we've done okay, and then it's all about starting to prep the boat ready to go in the container, because obviously for these flyaway events we've got to put it into a container, and that is usually going to happen about 4 months ahead of the World Championships. Obviously it will vary a bit depending whether it's Hong Kong, Australia or New Zealand, but you're working on those sorts of timelines. And we want to make sure that the boat is in tip-top condition before it goes in, that we've checked everything over, and that it's a slick process as we go in. We'll also be thinking about what we want to carry on the flight and what we don't want to, and we'll pack as much as we can in the container just to save us having to worry about things at the airport and things getting lost. So then if you haven't got another boat, you'll be boatless for a few months, but is over the winter generally. And the boat, you're looking for that to arrive in the destination about a month ahead. And if you're like me and slightly anal about these things, you'll be tracking it on the ship as it goes across and making sure it doesn't get stuck in Singapore or something like that. And then eventually you meet up with your boat at the World Championships and off you go. Next slide, please, Jonathan.
Helen,
Yeah.
I see that 12 months ahead you have to book fights. Is it that difficult sailing the job?
It is that difficult. Obviously, I've misspelt that, and it should be flights, not fights. But there are some fights that we have, and I like to get them planned in advance because that way I win.
And Helen, are you booking the flights before you know you've qualified, though?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, for a flyaway event, it's unusual for the UK to fill its allocation, and generally we will qualify anyway. But basically, I think we have 16 slots plus an extra one if we have the world champion, which we do. So they get taken out of the mix as well, and so they'll put you in rank order according to the qualification series. And then if anybody doesn't want their slot, they'll then go to the next on the list and the next on the list. But I say it's very rare for the UK to fill up all its allocation on the container event, which is a different thing to the Europeans.
Got you, thanks.
The European one, should I say? Yeah. So on to the trailer events. So it's a slightly different timeline. Again, you should know 3 to 4 years, ahead where it's going to be. But on this one, the qualification series is going to be a full 12 to 18 months ahead. So it's going to be the full qualification series ahead. So in that time, you will know if you're qualified before you book your accommodation in this particular guise, but we're still spending the time before that prepping where we want to go, because accommodation gets booked up really, really quickly. And so we want to be able to be on that as soon as we know we have qualified for that. But essentially the timeline is the same, except for it's just the research is truncated slightly because the qualification series comes earlier, and then you're booking after the qualification series instead. But that's just a difference. You just have to know which one you're going for with that. And as I say, with those ones, generally we will fill the allocation for a trailering event. Next slide, please. So for the flyaway events, you have to be kind of, well, we have a load of Excel spreadsheets that we ferry backwards and forwards between us to add things onto the list to make sure we cover everything off. So we have a checklist that covers all the boat preparations. So if we've got a new boat since the last time we've been away or whatever else, we'll check that the keel can come on and off easily. Because unless you're in a container with only 2 boats in it, which is quite an expensive way to do it, likelihood is on at least one of the trips, your keel will be coming off in the container. And what you don't want to be doing is finding out when you get to putting the boat in the container that the keel doesn't come off, because you only have 2 hours in which to pack them. So we'll go over all of the nuts, the bolts, the fittings, the sheets on the boat, making sure that they're all not fraying, there's no problems or anything like that. If you don't do that, we found out to our cost with our first boat in Hong Kong, when the bolts sheared on the shrouds, just as we got across the main shipping lane, and that day they'd forgotten to take any rescue boats over with us as well. So at that point, John had to do an all shipping channel mayday to get one of the boats to steer away from us. So that was slightly exciting. So yeah, so then we learned then that we must check all of the boats, bolts and fittings, etc. We will usually strip the boat of all the items that need to be taken off for scrutineering at this point, and just store them in the boat so that they're out of the way. And again, we can get going quickly just in case there are any flight delays or anything like that. And we'll make sure that we've got the straps, the ropes, the packing materials, everything like that that we need to make sure the boat doesn't move and it doesn't get damaged in transit. So before the day, you'll hopefully find out who you're going to be in the container with. There needs to be some discussions over who, is it a 4-boat container, is it 5 or 6? If you've got 4, 2 of you at least are going to need collapsible trolleys. They're quite useful for sea events anyway, actually saves your road trailer bearings going into the sea. Have we got a keel rack, so you can strap the 2 keels that come off securely in the back of the container. I say make sure who's going in the roof on the way out and on the way back. Usually whoever goes in the roof on the way out, the other two go in the roof on the way back. So you kind of take it in turns. And just thinking things through about what you're going to take in the container versus what you're going to take on the flight. So on the day that you're packing up, so you'll be given the day usually by whoever's been organised in the containers, which the Fleet Association usually does for you. You only have 2 hours to pack it, unless you've got somewhere to put it that they can drop it off and they can keep it and then come back again. So that usually happens for the boats coming from up north, where they usually pack 5 or 6 into a container. So they need more time to build wooden structures inside and everything else. But generally down south, we have 4 to a container. So we have only 2 hours in which to pack it, because they'll basically, the lorry driver will stay there and then take it away. So if you take longer than 2 hours, they will charge you for it. So time is literally of the essence. So usually we will get there well ahead of time, and we'll prep everything out on the floor ready to go in the container. We'll get all the keel bolts out, apart from a couple, so that we can just split the boat as quickly as we can do. We're just ready to basically almost do a Formula 1 pit stop in container terms into the container. One thing to note, when you do take your bolts off, do label them, because you're not going to remember which ones are which 4 months later, and do remember where you've put them. And it's usually in a very safe place, so safe that you can't remember. So just make a note of that somewhere so you don't have a panic when you get to the destination. So as I said, for the flyaway events, booking your accommodation early and book your flights when they become available. It just makes everything just that bit more manageable. You're not worried about it. You can get the flights that you want at the price that you want, rather than scrambling around at the last minute. Next slide, please. So on the training events, obviously we're used to training around the UK anyway, but just thought it was worth putting this in here. But again, the boat prep is pretty much the same. We'll still get it, check all the fixtures, fittings, strip it ready for scrutineering again. But what we also do this time is check the trailer over. We'll usually check the trailer bearings and re-grease them or change them. We also make sure that we have spare hubs with us, so if something does happen on the road, we can easily change them out. It's amazing how many people don't check their bearings. I think it was Simon Neller, or I say we, John, redid their bearings for them in Garda, because they're pretty much seized. So it is worth checking on those sorts of occasions. Do check the towing and trailering regulations in the countries you're going to be towing through. Italy has some interesting ones where you have to put a massive square sign on the back of the boat, or you just go fast to the country and hope the police don't pull you over. But there are various different regulations. For the car, you're probably going to be doing a lot more miles than we'd normally doing going around the UK. So always worth servicing your car. You don't want to go into limp home mode as you hit Kent on the way back. And check again what you need to have in the car for the country. So some countries say you have to have high visibility jackets for every seat in the car. Some it's for every passenger in the car. You might have to have breathalyzer tests. You might need 2 breathalyzer tests, all that sort of thing. I usually use the AA website for that. It's quite a good list of what you need in the different countries. And again, check the documentation that you need, what licenses, insurances, or the docs, some documentation. Some of the countries say you have to have the original vehicle registration document with you, some don't. So again, it just depends on where you're trading to. Obviously it will change after December, but it's worth checking anyway for that. Sorry, you could give it, go on John, next slide. So yes, scrutineering prep. As a one design, we have to pass scrutineering. There's usually only about 3 days maximum to do this, and we've got between 50 and 80 boats to go through it. So being prepared, knowing what you need to do, and getting prepared beforehand makes it so much less stressful than trying to rush through and fix things as you're going along. So there are 5 stations. There's the control and desk certificates, and you have to have all your certificates, your insurance certificates, membership and everything else to hand. They will check it, and it's amazing how many people turn up to events and they haven't got their insurance documents with them, and they're trying desperately to find them and all that sort of thing. So do make sure you've got all of that prepped and ready to go. We have the hull weighing and measuring, so that's the exciting one where you get to find out how much your boat weighs if you happen to be peering over the measurer's shoulder at the time. You have the spars, so making sure that all the masts and booms and spinnaker poles are all fine. Then there's the sails and the safety checks as well. So I say prep the boat beforehand. We usually will have a box for all the safety gear, for example, so we know we can just pull that out and hand it over and they can check it all in one go. And know which sails you're going to use for each competition. It's amazing how many people turn up at the sail station and are still having a discussion as to which ones they're going to sign in for that event, which just slows everything up. And the sail station is the one that takes the most time, which is always a good thing to note as well. We usually decide who's doing which station. Both of you don't have to be at the boat. One of you can go off and do the hull weighing whilst one's doing the spars. One of you can do the sails whilst the other one's doing the safety. It just makes it that bit quicker and you can get in and out within an hour rather than some people taking a few hours to get through. So it just makes it all a bit slicker and a lot less stressful from that point of view. Other preparations. So taking a comprehensive set of repairs and spares with you is always useful. You sometimes might need a torch. The photos on this slide are from Hong Kong, where we're having to re-rig a mast that we got off Chris Turner by the light of an iPhone, because it was so dark by the time the rest of the fleet got back. We were having to do it in the light because the next day was a lay day, so we had to take it back through scrutineering to get the mast re-signed in, so we were up against it a bit there. But yes, do make sure you've got everything that you need, few spares, etc, etc. Just makes it that bit more easy. So spare sheets, spare bolts, spare pretty much everything apart from a mast in this case, which is the one thing we did need. But yes, there's usually a few around of those if we need one. And then the other preparation I was just going to have a quick note of is just knowing what you need to perform well. So we know that we like process and we like to be able to kind of click into something that's familiar. That's how we perform better. We know what nutrition we need on the boat in terms of sort of isotonic drinks and all the rest of it to make sure that we can perform at our best and keep the energy levels up whilst we're racing. We also know what sort of accommodation we like to make it a relaxing and not stressful place to be for us as well. So knowing all those things and talking about it beforehand, again, just means you can prep and be the best you can be at the World Championships rather than everything just being a bit stressful and you being a bit uneasy about it all. Yeah, so I think that's me on this section, unless anybody's got any questions.
Oh, come on, any difficult questions? Okay. So what we'll do is we'll quickly go through the boats. So we've done a number of worlds. So we started off with Hakuna Matata. It's quite a famous boat. It won the nationals and was campaigned quite heavily when it was first bought by the Gerards, who ended up being world champions when they moved out to Australia. This is some of the pictures we've got of Hong Kong. And if you look at the bottom right, you can start to see that the forecasted, we got told when we went to Hong Kong that all we would get is 5-mile-an-hour breezes. We got a little bit more than that. We'll talk more about that, but we did get a typhoon that came through and we ended up with some extremely big seas. And there was one shot of one classic boat where it was surfing down a wave and it basically looked like a toy boat coming at a seaside and coming in on a wave, because the wave was about 20 to 30 foot long and it was just surfing its way down it. I wish I had that shot. I would definitely have that on my wall like you've got the J24 there. But it was a good event. We did a 2-year weight reduction. We took 5 kilos out of that. I remember Richard quite happily talking it all the way through, but we legally, and I say legally, but I was watching Alistair do the same now on the new boat he's got, Havoc. How do you take the stainless steel and put carbon fiber in? What is it you're doing to reduce the weight, and how do you actually maximize that? The boat still has to be legal. It still is measured in at the Worlds, and if it's not right, then you're not doing the Worlds. We put a lot of time on the water, and that resulted in some good position changes. We actually, the last finishing, the last jibe mark was about 50 meters away from the finish in Hong Kong. And and every time we jibed at the bottom mark, we took 1 to 2 places. So even on the last 50 meters, we were taking places. And then there's a great shot of one of Helen's friends scowling at her as we're just sailing straight past them, jibing around the mark. So boat handling was really key, and we'll talk a bit more about what we did to learn about how do we get that right. Our success, we finished in the top half for that Worlds. What do we do differently if we looked at the World Championships again? We optimized the boat for light airs, and we got a typhoon came through, and an interesting scenario. So, and also, you talk about Williams for yourself there. I got invited many years ago to Williams pit training day when Ralph Schumacher was driving, and it was fascinating that they measured how long the screw has been into a car, and then they checked it UV light. And actually, it was the bolts that broke for us in the heavy airs and dropped the rig, which was then obviously got more interesting as a super tanker was coming in and aiming straight for us. But we had to go through the whole process of getting a new bolts and putting the rig back together, thankfully without too much damage. So actually taking every screw out like a Formula One car and checking it and putting it back in again for major events means you can enjoy your holiday. And that's key. So just spending the time first is really important. And we thought, oh, we don't need big seas. Well, the waves were huge. It was a big sea event, so it was great. And actually, you see that tanker there, that's where the shipping lane is, the busiest shipping lane in the world on the top left. Actually, the mark itself was laid within 100 meters of Chinese water. And if any of us had gone too far out, there was actually the rescue boats there to pick us up and drag us back before we were arrested, because we were using the sail area that was so close to the Chinese territory waters. So again, looking at typhoons and some learnings. Well, if you look at the bottom right here, we actually strapped the boats down. Kettle Island, is it Kettle Island? I think, wasn't it?
Kettle Island, no, it's Middle Island.
Middle Island, sorry. Where that is, there's a wind acceleration zone, a wind funnel. And so when a typhoon comes through, there's cables all the way along the boat hard, and you strap the boats down. And so we all came in and we got told, you're not sailing tomorrow, there's going to be no buses, you're all locked down. And it was my first ever lockdown. Now I've been in a longer one, but you can see why they're used to it in China. The lockdown comes, that's it, and you prepare. So we strapped the boats down, we absolutely fastened everything in, and made sure it was all secure. Then people came and did the same and safety checked it. And then we got on the bus home, went to the bar, and then had an extra day relaxing in our hotel room, which was the smallest in Hong Kong. It's the smallest hotel rooms in the world, but watching the weather come through and the rain. But it was a great event. And if we looked at it, we then said, well, we need to go a bit faster. We got a better boat, got a newer boat. We also changed sail maker. Not because the sailmaker we had slow sails, it was Pennell backs, great sails. What we weren't getting is feedback, and actually we worked with Hydes. We were on their first early adopters and worked with them. And what that did means that we still get it. For instance, when we went to New Zealand, the sailmaker actually sent us emails every night after looking at the photos of the event. And he was giving us feedback about the trim on the sails, what we were doing wrong. So every day we were getting feedback and coaching from the sailmaker. And that was really key. We didn't ask him, he did it automatically. What we also went well is refining processes and routines. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through on the GoPro and some of the things we did. And this is where we actually really left the club a little bit and we went onto the circuit. And we've done that purely to sail at the higher level and sail against the boats that we will go to the Worlds with. Because if we don't sail at that level, you suddenly get shocked. And you still get shocked when you get to the Worlds because people from New Zealand turn up and they're exceptionally good. And so what was really good, what's gone well on that, we actually won Cows Week and we got our prep. We beat an ex-world champion, but that world champion has actually won Cows Week outright more times than anyone else dead or alive. So it was great to be able to beat him on the water as well as do that. Still need more time on the sea. We are still struggling with that, and it's something we need to do more of just to be able to learn how to sail in the waves. these boats are exceptionally wet, and if you don't get the waves right, you fill up very quickly, and that's the end of the race, really. You lose 5 or 6 positions. So we need to be better at that. So I'm going to go quickly into now what is the campaign we're doing with what is Forever Fish. So just so some of you know, I think some of you may have met John, but unfortunately John died on the Volvo race. He was my best man at my wedding. I was his best man. And a key crew of Scallywag on the 100 and 120, and then joined the Scallywag Volvo race. And he died, unfortunately, at Point Nero, which is the most remote place in the world. It was a crash dive that knocked him unconscious. And by the time they got the boat back upright, they couldn't get back to him. So there's certain things that we're doing to keep his name. We have a mark in the Isle of Wight. There's a local club, Scallywag, also do promotions on his name to help the family just know that he's still remembered. And this boat was actually, he's destined to go down to Australia and be sailed at Adelaide Sailing Club as part of that. So the branding and the name is part of that process. And we wanted to try and really go for a world championship. So we put a campaign together. It's decided halfway between race 1 and race 2 on a Datchet Sunday. And then Helen went into overdrive in the process.
Yeah, so I think what John, a bit of the backstory as well, is that both of them are 50 going to be 50 next year, and so we're going to be sailing against each other hopefully at the Australia Worlds, and obviously that couldn't happen. So we thought that actually what we could do is try and find a boat that was also going to be 50 years old, and name it after John. So yes, I went into a bit of overdrive to try and find a classic boat that was built in 1971 and would be in a state that you could take it to the Worlds. Strangely enough, that was quite hard to find. There's quite a lot of old boats, but not ones that you could actually bring up to racing standard at general open meetings, let alone at a Worlds. So after a bit of searching and a few Google alerts that set off, I still haven't managed to get rid of them yet. We found our new boat, which was called Happy Days. It's 2260, that was currently residing at South Cerney. So it wasn't too far away from us for us to go and have a look at it, actually. Clearly, it was going to need a lot of work, but it wasn't wooden, which was a good thing, and had been sailed recently. It hadn't just been sort of dying a death in a boat park somewhere. And so John did the deal to bring the boat back to Datchet. Not quite a 1971 boat. I think it's 1973 actually, but it's not too far out for that. So we've brought it back, sailed the boat a few times to see how the layout worked. Didn't really. What needed to change, quite a lot. What needed to be fixed, pretty much everything. And then to start learning differences between sailing a classic and an open boat, and it really is very different. It certainly doesn't plane at all like the open boat does. So we used the time on the water to draw up a list of what we needed to do to make the boat open event race worthy again. So things such as the hull was a mess, there wasn't any gel coat on it and looked hideous. We needed a new mast because it was just completely soft. We needed to move the shroud positions. There was no buoyancy, which John will come on to a little bit later. The sheeting, the control lines didn't really work. We didn't know if the keel would come off, and obviously we'd need to do that because it's a flyaway event. And we needed to look at all the fixtures and fittings, but we were definitely going to keep the crew seat, as that is the most comfortable thing in the entire world ever, particularly when it's in light winds.
So after we'd gone through that extensive list, what we did is strip the boat down. And sailing an old boat is a similar age to me. It does the same thing. It grows fittings like an old person grows hairs where you don't want them. And the first thing we had to do is actually look at every fitting and say, we need to either take it out, do we need it, do we want to, and we wanted to keep as much as we could, but it needed to be functional as well. So it didn't need to restrict us from winning races, but if we could, we would keep the existing product and we would then use it as we went forward. So I went through, started to strip out fittings, clean the boat up, ready to, so we could then take it from my house through to the actual boat shed itself. And this is when I remember Richard just laughing so much on a text when I sent this through. When you're looking at a boat, you're supposed to try and look everywhere. When you're buying a boat for a couple £100 or a few £100, you try not to insult the person that had their whole life and being very enthusiastic. So he said there was buoyancy in the back tank. We never looked in the back tank. When we did look at it, I filled a whole wheelie bin of Coca-Cola and milk bottles. That was the buoyancy. The problem was, you can see in the one on the there was still Coke and milk in there. So when I opened them up, it just was the most unpleasant thing in the world. As you can see, it was a nice warm day that day. But it was amazing how much weight it actually took out of what was supposed to be buoyancy. So we stripped the whole boat down, and I've done this before. I lived in South Africa for a few years. I took a fin over. Someone said it was the slowest fin in the club. I spent 2 days chiseling dirt out of it, put it back on the water, and won the first race purely because you just take weight out of the boat. And so we did exactly the same there. But thankfully, there are no more Coke bottles and milk bottles in this boat. It's gone.
Might be a few Lucozade bottles though. So following John's stripping and cleaning and removal of old milk bottles and Coke bottles, we took the Flying 15 off to Pete's workshop, who luckily he's my husband, so I can make him do things like this. And it's the third 15 he's had through his workshop, which is always useful. And he was going to give it some TLC over the winter. As I say, luckily, third boat we'd done, and it's the third boat we'd taken the keel off, and I have to say this was the easiest of the lot. The worst one, I think, was Hakuna Matata. Actually, it took us hours to get that one off. This one seemed to just, yeah, it was absolutely fine. But it needed a lot of work. It had been bashed around. It was very, very rusty. So Pete repaired it, refaired it, and then resprayed it. And then whilst the keel was off, he also repaired and resprayed that as well, which, as you've probably seen now, it looks quite nice. And on the next slide, he also looked at the deck, and this was the most tricky job of the lot. It was old fiberglass, very brittle, had given away, and you can see all these little ridges underneath the desk, and those are the supports. So that's meant to kind of hold the weight of the Helm and the crew as they're hiking out or stepping over the decks, as it were, and they had all been broken in either 1, 2 or 3 places. So he had to basically repair each one of those and strengthen them to give the deck its strength back again. He also had to repair and fill all the holes for all the fittings that were taken out, so it didn't look quite so sponge-like. But after a few weeks and grumpiness back home over the how difficult a job it was, he called up John and said he could take it back now. Thank you very much. And it made its way back to John's.
So while Helen and Pete were doing the difficult work, I took the easy jobs and started putting decals onto the new sails that we bought, ordered up the new mast, but also modified the trailer. One of the things that we do is to have everything the same on each boat. So we've got 2 boats, just because, you know, you never have enough boats in your life. So, but every process is the same. So we actually cut the trailer down on the top, so we don't need supports. It reduces the weight for trailing, reduces windage, but actually means launching and retrieval is easier. So there's certain things that we've learned, that we've documented, and we've even videoed the retrieval and launching. They'll say, can we do things quicker and easier, just to make life easier? So actually modified the trailer. Don't want to do this like the last one where I just let it go, and I'd asked Gabrielle to get a diver down to recover that trailer. So this one, we put new bearings on it, suspension, and got it ready to go. And you can see as well that the straps there on there, this is to go just before I pick it up, and all the straps have got positioned so that when we want to trail it, it's just very quickly clips together and we're on the road, and there's not a hardship to actually go through. Then the boat came back, so she came back. You see the straps are now on. Going to do a quick plug here. This is if anybody needs any work doing on their boat, I would just recommend Pete. If you look at the hull shape there, you can see the reflection on there. The wonky lines is more about my patio that I laid rather than actually the hull shape itself. It was an exceptional job, and that has got us to a world level of the boat speed. So it puts us back into the up with Mike, with Richard, and the sense of hull, in the sense that the boat is smooth. It's not got the same hull shape, but it's certainly there. So if anybody who needs any work doing, I would recommend that. But we got the boat back, we started to fit it out, and we fitted it out exactly, or as close to the other boat, Hakuna. And the reason being is things like you've got on here, the Cunningham is in the blue line. It's in the same position as it is on our other boat. So we're using muscle memory and that. So if we want to drop the Cunningham off, we know that the hand goes to the same point. So everything else was tried to be detailed and set out the same way. There are probably about 12 things different, but if not, the position for the tow straps, the way that they're operated, everything else is exactly the same, so that we operate in the same way and we can change boats without affecting our gears too much. We kept as many fittings as we could, but we obviously had to put in big, longer tracking for the jib just because we were moving to the new type of jib. We got a new boom and mast. As we said, we needed to do it, and we were hit the water. And we were second and first on our first relaunch on that. And we're pretty happy with the boat. We're competitive with it, and it's great fun to do it. And then, of course, the small thing called COVID-19 has changed plans a little bit. So we're all in standby. We don't know whether we're going or not. Probably not. It looks like most. I heard today from Hides that the Fireballs have delayed all their World Championships for 2 years. So basically, and I think that will be the story. But we still do want to go. We still want to donate the boat to Adelaide, to the sailing club there. But it means that you're probably going to see the blue deck for a little bit longer as we're going through. We'll let you know in August what we're doing. So I'm just going to keep throwing. There's a little bit of interaction bit coming here first, but one of the things we did with Hakuna, which was a big step change for us, the first boat, is we put a video on, and we recorded our video and our sailing. So this is Helen's favorite video. I tried to get it to work and I couldn't, so I've just got a screenshot. This is just about the Chinese jibe. It's blowing about 30 to gusting 40 knots. I'm trying to take the thing down. Can anyone see why we would be Chinese jibing at this point? If Richard, you can enjoy yourself on this. To give you a clue, you can see Helen's already identified it while she's ducking her head. There's nobody steering the boat. I've completely lost control.
Yeah, where's the tiller?
Yeah, the tiller's there. It's just that my hands are a little bit. Now the best bit for this, and I'll admit it, when this boom came across, it hit my head. I do have a large head, right? I understand that. It bent the boom, so all I got was a slight bruising, and we had to replace the boom. So this is why this is Helen's best video shot, and she has that video. Anybody wants to see it, she's willing to share it at that. But what we did is videoed every failure and every success that we could, and we go through it. So this is actually the same day. This was about 2.5 minutes before my epic fail, and this is 2012. So you can see it's a long time ago, and we've done a lot of improving our sailing. But this is a bit of an interactive point. Can anybody go through and give me, what we do is I watch for about 1.5 hours of video, and I try and list out and detail one positive that I saw from the video, or Helen does that, and 2 areas of improvement. That doesn't mean you're bad, but 2 areas that you would improve. Now, I've got 2 shots that these are 30 seconds apart, coming into a mark. Anybody got a positive, and then in 2 areas of improvement, knowing that we've improved a lot since then, so we did work on it. Any thoughts?
John, my question would be, did you think you were probably upright?
Yes.
And the camera, just as it would for all of us, by the way, just shows how difficult it is to do that simple thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's one of them. Exactly. So it's one of the improvements was the boat was healing. Anyone got any others? There's about, I've got 2 positives on here, and I've got probably about 20 development areas. I've never seen you so close to that screen, sir. It's brilliant.
Would you regard that amount of weather, Helm, as okay?
I think it's excessive for that, and that's some of the helm and the setup. Yeah. So rather than anyone else, and Roger, you got any thoughts? There's a lot of studying.
At the first picture, you appeared to be looking behind you rather than towards the mark.
Yeah, I do that a lot. I'm trying to understand where everyone is on the fleet.
Okay.
And what we've done is we've actually got, this works really well. Helen's talking it forward and I'm looking backwards, and she's constantly talking to me. So we constantly talk all the time, and she's giving me a mental picture of where everyone is, what's going on, and how badly we're doing. And if at times she'll be even the motivator and try and pick me back up again. But we have those processes. So let me show you a couple. Well, firstly, I'm not sitting out. I've corrected that. That was given, and there were some videos in Garda where it was pretty embarrassing. So the boat heel is excessive, as Richard, as you said. It feels like you're upright, but actually, if you're sitting on the side of the boat, you're not. And Flying 15 decks, any deck with a white deck, the actual deck itself slopes downwards. So actually, if you're not hiking, feeling that you're sloping down, you're hiking downhill, the boat isn't upright. So it's one of those things you've got to learn. Actually, to hike a Flying 15, you've got to be feeling like you're hiking downhill. So you head downhill. And it's the only way of getting the boat flat. What I've actually shown here, so I've got a red line in, which is showing the angle of heel, and that really doesn't work. And one of the reasons for that was here. And if I've actually drawn this out, and it's a bit like a sailmaker would, but you can do this on any picture. You can see that the point of camber, i.e. the deepest part of the main here, is in the middle. It's blowing 30 knots. So what am I doing wrong? I don't have enough Cunningham on. I don't have enough Vang on, because here as well, I'm not sheeting hard enough, and this leeward line is not waving in the air, and it's not pulling the rig. The rig is straight, but at the top, it's not bending to weather. So all of those things are saying to me, I don't have enough kicker, I don't have enough Cunningham, and therefore I'm not sailing upright enough, and I'm not hiking hard enough. What's positive? The mast is straight. I like that. That's the way I want it. It's a slight bend to windward. And the actual jib setup, this kills me every time I look at this. The jib setup's perfect. The Cunningham line is right, and Helen's loving this, because every time it's like, well, I got it right, you didn't. But the whole setup here was wrong. And this shows, if you look at that, and that's just two shots, two camera grabs of a video that's an hour and a half long, the learning you can take. Any questions or thoughts on that?
I'm just glad this is being recorded.
So what do we do? Every 2 weeks, we film ourselves for 2 races. And we'll go through them, or I'll go through it and then send a condensed version to Helen on Dropbox. And then basically give some feedback. Sometimes Helen will do it, but it's predominantly myself because I've got the setup. I work on what's going on, what's working well, and then correct errors. And we rewrite the processes. So we look and we map everything out. We think about how we do things, and we change the way we're doing it. And that allows us to be able to have developed the boat and the boat speed. The other thing is when you're racing close-handed with some of the boats at the front, the video also picks up what they're doing. And so there's things that we've learned, like in the sea, we weren't sitting far enough back. And it's only until you sit there and see the guys at the front sitting right at the back of the boat in heavy seas, you start saying, that's what I should be doing. So it allows you to learn the mistakes over time. But don't beat yourself up. You've got to reward yourself. And we only do it every 2 weeks, because what we want to do is in 2 weeks' time go back and say, have we changed and improved what we said we would? So we can feel good about that as well. One of the things we do is we look to be over the start line by 1 meter, 1 race in 10. Now, actually, that means being called back 1 race in 10, and we don't get there. But what we try and do is to sit there and go, how do you do that? Because in a fleet, and I use here, this is the Hong Kong Worlds. There's 54 boats on the line. What you can't see here, but the gun has just gone. The smoke has just risen. Okay, So he's fired the cannon off, and you can see the cannon guy's fired it and is looking at down the line. There are only 5 boats on the start line. And because of that, everybody else is saying, well, I thought I had a good start, but they're already now sitting in somebody else's breeze. So it was one of those key learnings for us. And, you know, the other one here, you've got 4 boats that haven't even pulled their sails in yet, and the gun's gone at a world championship level. So really thinking about, can you be over the line by 1 meter, puts you on the line. And if you are over, hey, go back. Doesn't matter, right? Because by then, by the time you've gone back, you're still in with the fleet, right? So the other thing we did, and was about mental agility, we had that conversation about who's going well, how's it going, positive conversations. You know, the one race in 4 in a world's year or prep year, we'll go out one day and we will spend the whole day. If we're on a lift, we'll tack onto the header. If we're on we'll jibe onto the header. We will sail bad courses. If someone tacks and covers us, we'll stay under it. What we'll do is have a day where it's really bad day. And we even go and hit marks. We'll go and hit 1 or 2 marks and do our turns. The idea being is learn, if a really bad day, where you sit and how you do, and you will be surprised you don't do that bad. You're mentally achievable. You can mentally achieve better results because you can sit there and go, if someone tacks on me or I have to tack onto a header, you don't beat yourself up. You just sit there and go, let's go for it. And I watched and sailed against Paul Ricard Johansson, who's a phenomenal Olympian sailor and a dragon sailor, and won the Gold Cup and Dragons more times than anyone else. And he in the Etchells would sail behind Dennis Conner in his wind shadow. And he did that because at some point he knew that Dennis would tack on him. And all he wanted to do for 1 race in the practice was just do that. And the irony was Dennis never did it because Dennis realized that he couldn't get rid of it. So it just changes your thought process and your mental attitude. The biggest thing that we've done, and this is part of having a project manager as a crew, but also our company I was working for previously, we use Kaizen, which is a car manufacturing. Toyota brought it in, which is change for good, i.e., continuous improvement, the 1% cycling rule. How do you continuously make small steps of improvement, which is what the videos, what we do. We map every process. When we go to a set club, we will talk in the car for about 2 hours for a drive. When we pull into a club, Helen and I will not talk to each other. We have a process to rig the boat, and we can rig a boat from the unhitch of the car to be ready to race in 20 minutes. And you see other people do that, like Charles Apthorpe, that will turn up and rig a boat incredibly quickly. We don't need to talk to each other. We know each other's jobs. And if someone's running late, we can do other jobs. But what we do is we have a process set that means we can do it very quickly. And likewise, packing up. And I would advise the same thing. Try and think about how you do everything that way. It sounds really bad, but it means that you can pack a boat up. We can pack our boat up the trail and go home quicker than some people on a club can pack their boat up, just put the cover on it. And that makes a big difference to your life at the end of it. We're nearing the end of this part, and then I'll just do a few slides on Harken, but I'm going to hand over to Helen.
Yeah, so you might wonder why we put ourselves through this cycle, really. And yes, it is to get some good sailing, but it is also great fun. You get to see some amazing places. A few of these shots, the one on the left is from Hong Kong Worlds, where the Nationals prize giving was hosted at Sam Chan's house, which I think is not the most expensive house in Hong Kong, but I think is the second most expensive house in Hong Kong. And this is the view off of his infinity pool that looks at the Bank of China. And it's just one of those things that you just wouldn't be able to have that experience otherwise. And I think it's also about the sort of the networks that you get to see every 2 years, the same group of people from around the world. And you get to sort of learn different things and make friendships and get those networks going around. And it is just a really nice network of people. You get to see amazing places. You know, John got to New Zealand because I made him go, because I like New Zealand and he hadn't been. And, you know, well, Garda's not a world championship, I know that, but it's the same sort of premise that you go there and the tunnels there where they filmed the James Bond car chase. So I drove John's car through there. It's a little bit white, but anyway, it wasn't too bad. A Volvo's not really an Aston Martin, but, you know, needs and must when the devil drives and all that. And yeah, and when you're in Dublin, Don didn't go, but I sailed with the guy who was scowling at me in Hong Kong. Yeah, we went to the Guinness factory and things like that. And it's just a good sort of, it's not just sailing, it is a holiday as well. And just doing a bit of research and going out and using your lay days or days where you're blown off or whatever else to be able to go out and see the sights is just a nice way of decompressing as well. But yeah, so it's not just all about sailing. It is about making it fun and seeing other places.
Thanks, Helen. I'll just quickly go through Harken and then we can then do questions at the end and make sure we finish. So, so I was lucky enough actually to be, because of the Etchells Worlds, I ended up being invited to fly out to the US and meet with the Harken brothers and spend some time on actually their boat at the Annapolis Boat Show, and ended up becoming their agent. At 20, 25, 26 years old, it was a great experience. These guys are brilliant. They set the company up. They were originally selling Vanguard boats. They were making Olympic type boats, Vanguard, and Snipes and other boats that they loved within the US. And they started to make these blocks. And that was really key. But I'm going to ask a question, because there's a whole lot of, you know, why Harken? How did it become so successful? So the question I've got is, this is the 001. It's still sold, right? It's what boat was this originally designed for? And that's what made Harken so successful.
Was it an American design?
They're American. They're American boats. American. It was made in. They're actually based in Wisconsin. If you look at the top right of this slide, it might give you a clue. Okay.
Was it wherever it was based? I'm guessing it. Oh right, okay, you've done that.
Ice yachting.
Yeah.
Just purely because I know you're trying to work it out. But I used to go every January across for the global sales meeting, and I did it for 3 years. For 2 years, we did a thing called chasing the ice, which is, you think sailing's stupid. I always thought rowing was a stupid sport, but sailing is an even worse sport. But then you put it onto ice, and there's a couple of things. It can be way too windy. The ice could be breaking up, or you find a perfect condition, and then you find out the fishermen have gone out and put holes in the ice. And driving and going along at 70 miles an hour on the DNs, which are the small ones, and port and starboard is at about 110 miles an hour. Get it wrong, it's pretty horrible. So I spent 2 years what's called chasing the ice, where you go out there and you drive around for 2 days trying to find a regatta that's working, and it doesn't. The biggest thing is that if a gust hits you or you need to bear away, you will accelerate unless you can release the rope quickly. And so the 001 was all about release. It was about, on the DN, how do I release this out so I can bear away, or, as Peter Harken say, and it's miss the effing hole, because you would always find one fisherman that's been out there and Peter Harken broke 23 bones in his sailing career, just to put it there. And he was the proud member of what's called a coffin club, which is the most breakages in 1 year sailing. So the whole idea was about release. So when I put that then into a little bit, why do therefore Olympians, and why do Olympics? Because a lot of people say Harken blocks bigger, they're more expensive, and I get that. I earned my money on commission. You know, they were expensive. But why did the Olympic guys choose them? And so a couple of thought processes. Firstly, there's on the top right here, I'm going to go top right to left. You've got rollers here, and you can see the surface area. So the more surface area you have in a ball bearing block, and rollers they have on the bigger blocks, on the big boats, you will create more friction because purely you're putting two points to touch to actually roll. So a ball bearing has the smallest amount. And then there's different ball types. There's Delrin, which is the white balls that you'll see in a Harken. The Taulon, which are the yellow ones you'll see in the furler systems that you have on the Flying 15 because they're stronger. You have stainless steel balls. You don't tend to see them in Harkens purely because they have aluminium casings, so therefore the stainless steel balls will destroy them. Cage rollers and uncaged rollers, and then sleeve bearing. So the sleeve bearing was what they really wanted to replace. So you can see here, this is load bearing capacity versus the actual friction that you're getting. So the best ones were the Delrin or the Taulon balls, but they created more friction. So what the Harken brothers did, and this is what was revolutionary to them, and it still is the sheave itself. So if I look at the fine edge, the ball bearing is in there, but you only have 2 to 3 points at any one time where the ball's actually touching somewhere. So what you've got is a wider sheave than most, and I'll talk about why that is. But to take the load bearing, they have a wider sheave, and they have therefore more ball bearings, but less touch points. So to create what is the speed. And by doing that, we're quickly going through this so we can finish on time. This is a Harken block with those 2 points. And if you overload them, you will crush the ball. You'll flatten the ball, right? If it's overloaded a little bit, it will come back. If you overload a lot, you've done it. You'll know because the ball bearing block won't be a ball bearing block anymore. It'll be a sheave. Competitors used what was a rounded here. And the reason they did that is because if it's rounded, the ball, as it's compressed, moves and expands or misshapes into the rounded position. And by being rounded, it can take more load. So what you'll see is the competitors for Harken will say that their block sizes, their blocks are smaller and can take more load. And they're absolutely correct. The difference being is the yellow boat and the red boat. And what we've talked about earlier today is when that gust hits you, and as Roger said, it was because the crew's not in there helping enough, right? Which is, the cruise union's discussion. But it's about how quickly can you release the line. So if you work with the Olympic guys that I was working with many times ago, and actually Richard Lovering was one of the Olympic guys that I was working with, the high sales designer, and that's where we got to know each other many years ago. We would work with them and saying, well, what block do you want it to do? How quick do you want it to escape? How quickly do you need it to move? Or how much load? So there are some things, if you look at Forever Fish, we've kept the original blocks. We don't need to change them because I don't move them that often. Halyard tension. I do move it, but I don't release it that much. But on other things where I need to change the line quicker, the main sheet, kicker, we have moved to Harken bigger blocks, twice the size that we had on. And what we've done is created a different point where we can release the lines quicker and using cascades and different systems from there. So when you're looking at your boat and you're doing the videoing, some of the questions you've got is when you're releasing the line compared to others, are you getting the rope out quick enough? Because on an ice yachting, it was very scary when you didn't, because you were going along at 70 miles an hour and you're being catapulted out the boat. You sort of got to know it was going to go wrong. But on a sailing boat, it just does like the yellow boat, leans over and you say, I'm not sure what went wrong. And that's the thought process that you've got from the Olympic guys back down to a club level sailing. So I'm not going to go too much and bore you on the Harken any more than that, but it was one of those points where a lot of people don't understand why the Harkens are bigger and therefore cost more. It was just an understanding of saying, I'm not saying use Harken on everything. What I'm saying is choose the right block that will allow you to be more successful in your racing. So we've come to the end of the line. And again, any questions, difficult ones, Helen's primed to answer those. Any easy questions, I'm here and available.
John, just thinking of your last bit there, not really a question, but going through my mind is the Olympic cycle 64 to 68, when engineering innovation was starting to come. And what I remember was that David Hunt, who subsequently went on to Tempest, I think, now he really shook things up by building a very wide diameter set of main sheet blocks, not for the rest of the boat, but in the main sheet area for John Oakley's Flying Dutchman, number 133. And everybody thought, oh, big block is the way to go to reduce friction, precisely your point. And subsequently in the same Olympic cycle, then Rodney Patterson came in from the other side, and he went for bearings, but to build a smaller, lighter block.
Yeah.
And of course, then kind of Rodney's history took over. But it was quite interesting because it's like an echo of both sides of your point there.
Yeah. Taking both, maximizing what's the right sheave size and having the right ball bearing. So actually on some of the big boat stuff we did, like when we did the an 80 footer I put together, we had the rollers and the block. So actually when you release the load, the rollers would start on a big sheave, and then as the reload would go, Harken had then ball bearings that would take over and actually move off the rollers. So the rollers were there for high load, and then as the loads ease, the ball bearings would expand back out and would take over and become lower frictions when you release the line. So those are some of the things that you get into, but you're then making a conversation of how big is the sheave, how big is the block, the weight that you want above your head versus anything else.
And actually a lot of Harken's blocks, which are very common now in Flying 15s, are extremely light because of all the engineering that's gone into the fabric of the block.
Yeah. The irony is the Harken block is an air block, even though everyone talks about air blocks. The original 01 block actually has nothing inside it. It's just a plastic covering. So it's completely an air block like everybody else's.
Helen, with when you're going to events and the two of you sailing together, in terms of psychology, when you're on the water, how do you work as a team in terms of sort of when things go wrong, learning from that, but also making sure you don't get distracted from the thing that's just happened, as it were, and it doesn't foul the rest of your race up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something I learned quite a lot with rowing, really, is that if something goes wrong, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to get on to the next stroke. I think the same as the sailing, you get over the what you need to do to rectify it if you've done a crash dive or whatever else, and then as soon as you're back up and running, that's it. You're back into race mode, and I think that's all you can do. You just have to be very focused and just compartmentalize and just go, that's gone. We can't do anything about it now. There's no point yelling at each other, shouting, whatever else. If we want to do that, we can do that off the water. What we've got to do now is get back on the race. You rectify and then just almost behave like it hasn't happened and get on with it. I think that you agree, John.
If something happens though, at a turning mark or something, and the situation arises again during the same race, then, or looks as though it's going to, would you have a discussion at that point about how you might handle it differently, or do you wait till after the race to have a quick debrief between yourselves about what went wrong, what could have gone better, etc.?
I think it depends on what the problem was, whether it is brought about by another boat or whether it's something that went wrong in the process or whatever else. I'm quite used to being shouted at from a rowing point of view. We got coached. I mean, what was weird for me when I moved into sailing, I was used to being coached every single outing. You got shouted at every single outing. Every other day you were videoed and showed what you were doing wrong. And so I have no problem with being told what I've just done wrong. I'll deal with it, and you get on with it, and that's it. And hopefully I won't do it wrong again. So it just depends on what it is. Feedback's a gift at the end of the day. And John's in charge of the boat, so if I've done something wrong, I'll sort it out.
What we tend to do though is we have some set conversations, so as soon as we get ourselves back into it, start communicating. So Clive Woodward was doing a talk on rugby one time. He talked about CTC, which was very famous in the rugby, which is centre, touchline, communicate. And he taught all the guys on the rugby to go through that. So when everything went, if it was going well or if it went wrong, they had exactly the same conversation. We do the same, which is we start talking about, we communicate, but we start talking about clouds and other boats. And when we talk about the boats, they're predominantly the ones the other side of the lake. So we're not looking at, so on Datchet, we'll be talking about what a topper is doing at the clubhouse, because that gets our head away from what we've done and back into what's coming down the line. And that we go through that set process, and that's again just into that routine. And then I've been taught, I tell with a guy called Owen Parker, he never took anything off the water. If you took anything off the water, you were sacked. It was as simple as that. So you'd have the conversation on the way in, and then you'd have a drink and move on. And that's the way we work.
Yeah, that's good.
John and Helen, I think it's sailing against you, as we have now quite a bit over the years. It's fabulous to see the way you work the boat, simply fabulous. When you go off to a world championship, though, there can be a lot of pressures on. And I was wondering, Helen, do you find that John is consistent through a championship, or does he kind of have mood swings as the championship goes ahead? And if he does, what do you do to prepare yourself to handle it?
I think you always have ups and downs, and I'll probably have. Well, I know I have ups and downs. Whether John knows them or not, I don't know. But I think when you get used to sailing with somebody, you can kind of tell what's going on. And what I try to do is he'll go very well. He can go quite quiet, and it's that point where I know he's either lost a bit of focus or something else, and you have to kind of start talking even if I'm talking a load of rubbish. Just to get him to kind of think what's going back in again. And there are days, they always have a bad day. And at that point, you have to kind of like pick him back up, give him a cider and all the rest of it. And I think it's just being attuned to that. And I think now, having sailed with him for 10 years, you can pick up on that easier than you would do if you're swapping crews in and out all the time. And I think that's what
make it easier. Do you think that you're a mixed gender team?
I don't know. I guess whether it's the gender or just the psychology, I don't know. I think the dynamic works. Well, I don't know if I'm how I am because of my gender, or I'd be like this if I was a bloke, is what I'm trying to say. I think it's more about the dynamic and the psychology and finding the right person to be that team. And I think the fact that we've been sailing with each other now for 10 years shows that we gel well as a team. And quite why that is, I don't know. I don't think it's particularly because I'm a woman. I think it's probably more to do with my sporting background, really, more than anything else.
Just, I'll give you the day that Helen was Phil that put us together, and he was saying that there's this great lady just giving up rowing because she wants to find a proper sport, and we went out in those, and then she fell out the boat twice. The thing that got me, and the reason we said we could make this work, was that on the last mark rounding, we went around the mark and we were third. And I turned to Helen and said, if you hike really hard now, we could get second place. And there's only four or five boats out. But we halfway up the beat, I turned to Helen and said, are you okay? Because she hadn't spoken to me. And she'd actually bitten her way through the life jacket. So her determination was something that I just said, we can make that work, because it was about, okay, how do we want to work together? And that's what we've done. And we're an equal voice. We do have a rule. I own the boat. I pay the bills. So it is my decision. I am the skipper of the boat. But ultimately, if you see the way we work, and you've seen that, we're equal, and we make everything work on the process. We communicate. And Helen, even down to this presentation, right? Helen's done 50% of the presentation. It's fantastic. Right. Sorry, go on.
No, it's really interesting listening to you both speak about one design class, because mine's mostly been in J24s, and it's very interesting. A lot of similarities, albeit that it's a 4 or 5 person team, but a lot of what both of you talk about, in particular about the camaraderie, I think around, people you meet, and Helen spoke about it, is good. And certainly about the preparation, I think, in terms of going to sort of more international events, etc. So it's quite, and I think for me, having done a lot of different, mostly until the last 8 years, I suppose, handicap racing, which I've enjoyed, but actually one design is very different actually, and I think it doesn't matter what it's in actually, whether it's laser ones or flying 15s or J24s. It's quite a different feel actually, and you all form part of a big family really. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's a leveler. You all got a common goal, but if you make a mistake, it's not because your boat's any better than anyone else's. They'll all say that, but it's actually the boats are pretty much of one design. So if you're last or first, there's a reason. It's normally about the way you've sailed the boat rather than the actual design.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. It's great.
Thank you guys. I'll stop that. Let everyone go for the clap and for that. Stay safe. At some point, find a razor and we'll go from there. So thank you very much.
What are you trying to say, John?
Hey,
Helen looks fine.
I'm giving up on that one. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much. Well done. Thank you.
Helen. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye.